Well, hello, everyone. This is Daniel here at the SOLA Network, and I have with me Danny Kwan, Dr. Danny Kwan. And Danny Kwan has been in ministry for 3 decades. He's leading family and youth ministry at Yongsang Presbyterian Church in Pennsylvania. He is also a PhD and teaches college courses, university courses at Eastern University. He's the author of 3 books, including a youth workers field guide to parents, and a book about mission trips as well. It is my privilege to be sitting with Danny, and so Danny, I'm so grateful that we can have this time together. And one of the things that was intriguing to me was that you're a ministry veteran and you're a lifer for youth ministry. So I'd love to hear about your journey, youth ministry. How'd you get involved? How's it been so far?
Yeah, so I serve in a Korean American context, and at least on the East Coast here, we have a couple seminaries in Philadelphia that a lot of Korean Americans attend. And so while they attend, they usually do youth ministry as what they call a chandosa, translate evangelist. And after seminary, I did some more studying, and then I wound up taking a full-time youth ministry position. I really didn't expect to do youth ministry 30 years. It just, a lot of my friends went into church planning, became senior pastors. For me, it was just about, just pastoral and professional development, training. I've had some opportunities to do youth ministry outside my church. Worked for a company called Youth Specialties, and I write and work for this company called the Youth Cartel presently. And so those kind of professional, pastoral ministry opportunities and development in my life kind of just fueled my love for youth ministry, both in the local church and also working and training and teaching youth workers outside the church. That led to more studies, doing a PhD that focused on innovation, but how churches innovated in doing youth ministry paradigms. And so again, just so many things related to the youth ministry field just fueled my calling and passions in youth ministry. Again, my studies, again, and so it just happened. And I think that first 5 years after seminary is critical for young pastors. Your first full-time position, whatever it can, it is, youth ministry, assistant pastor, you kind of begin to form your calling and your passions, and God brings opportunities. And for me, it just happened to be things in youth ministry, and that led to 5 years becoming almost 30 years.
Wow. As you talk about that, I realize that you hardly get a lifer when it comes to youth ministry, someone who's been youth ministry their entire pastoral ministry career. I think part of it has to do with churches and people thinking that youth ministry is like a stepping stone kind of ministry. Yeah. And then sometimes I remember even as a youth pastor getting comments like, when are you going to be a real pastor? And things like that. And so how would you respond to that?
Yeah, I mean, I don't expect, like, I've trained 28 seminary interns, Bible college seminary interns over 17 years. We started a program in 2004 to bring in interns under my care and at our church. And I don't expect them to all be lifers in youth ministry. And definitely there's a lot of stereotypes about youth workers. We're immature, we have goatees, we can't manage money, we stink at church administration, and it's a stepping stone. And I think I'm going to talk about longevity in ministry. I think we're going to talk about that. But, in any ministry, it's hard and difficult. And just having that real personal and a pastoral uh, theological framework of, hey, my identity and my worth is in Jesus Christ. Who I am is in Jesus. And, when Paul talks about, how, he could brag about how his credentials and superiority, but everything's nothing compared to knowing Jesus Christ. That's how I've taken this calling in the youth ministry. Yeah, sometimes people look down on it. People think it's a stepping stone. I get that from my senior pastor. Even in my church, after 28 years of being at one church, whenever we get a new assistant pastor, I always kind of sense, just in my feeling, that there's always a little feeling out with a new pastor. They're like, what's this old guy doing in youth ministry? Is he a loser? Is something wrong with him? Why is he still doing it?
Yeah.
And just, again, having that personal identity in Christ, and who I am is in Jesus, and I'm loved by him, and he and my worth is fully in him. That keeps me grounded and secure in my position and who I am. And again, it's a calling to that personal identity in Christ, but also feeling called to loving teenagers and their families. And part of the reason of staying in it so long is my role in itself has changed from just being a youth pastor to finding places to work more with parents and volunteers and adults. And as I've been at my church longer, I'm being part of more intricate in the senior leadership of the church, and things like that. So I found ways to reinvent my role and find things that just fulfill my calling in ministry.
Well, I'm encouraged to hear that, and I'm encouraged you have this great attitude about your ministry and the kingdom work that you're doing, and you're investing, you're making disciples, and it's not just the students, it's also their families as well. So, when I was a youth pastor, I was saying to myself, there's not much in terms of resources for Asian American youth ministry. When I was serving in the Chinese church that I was at. So I Googled Asian American youth ministry, and I found your articles.
Okay.
So thank you for that, by the way. Just you're speaking to some of the things that I was dealing with, and so I filed your name away. And so I want to hear from you. What are some distinctive things, especially for youth ministry to Asian Americans in the immigrant church model where many of us are ministering? What's distinctive that maybe we may be able to find in a book? Just a book generally about youth ministry.
Well, there's a book, it's a little bit dated now, but DJ Shuang wrote a book on Asian American youth ministry. He edited the book, and there was a lot of different people contributed chapters to that book. I contributed a chapter, and I think it's a very important, good book. He also wrote a book on second generation English speaking Asian American ministries. And then a lot of the books that I'm reading specifically about Asian American ministries, Dr. Ben Shin from Talbot Seminary, Ken Fong wrote a book. So again, it's just more about understanding the context of Asian American ministry, and specifically to Asian American youth ministry. It changed a lot. I know we talked about a recent podcast that SOLA and you did about silent exodus versus the silent divergence. And that's something I'll talk about in a little bit. But specifically, always one of the big issues has been the bicultural Asian Western American identity of teenagers and their struggles with their bicultural identity. And I think naturally in their adolescent teenage development, when they hit that 12 to 18-year-old range, that especially more recently,
Mhm.
the idea of race and culture and ethnicity with, the politics of the day, I see, even again, more recently, kids these days facing issues of race and culture in their schools, which are predominantly white, at least here in Philadelphia area. And so again, the issues of race, culture, I think is a big thing. And along with that, the value of education and the pressure of success, mental health in general in youth ministries
Mm.
has become a big issue recently, but because in our Asian culture, it's still a myth and a lot of shame involved in that. How do you deal with that, and how do you make that more of a open topic in in our youth group? And then most recently, and again, I would encourage everybody to listen to that Silent Divergence article. I see a lot of Asian American churches coming of age, and like I still serve in an immigrant church where Korean language is dominant, and the parents are more Korean speaking. Youth group is separate. It's in English, but their parents worship in Korean. My role in my 30 years for a long time in the immigrant church was, I would say it was a lot like a social worker. We were there to serve the teenagers and minister to them and disciple them and taking the mission trips and all that stuff, but also with the families and parents, helping them assimilate in the schools. When parents had trouble at school with their children's grades, mental health issues, we would go help them. One of the more popular things I did over the years was a financial aid seminar in Korean language for Korean speaking parents, because even for me who grew up here, financial aid is like hieroglyphics. It's like impossible to understand, and let alone immigrant parents. We used to take a great discipleship event was taking students to college tours in the summer. We'd go for like a week. We'd go to Boston. We'd go down to DC, stay at hotels, visit colleges, because the immigrant parents were a lot of times blue collar workers, had their own businesses, were busy. They couldn't go on ski trips, couldn't go on ice skating. The retreats were really big. But your Silent Divergence article, where kind of podcast where talks about the new immigrants who are more equipped because of computers and Googling. They don't need my help as much in registering for schools and learning about financial aid, and they are more quote unquote westernized, Americanized. So they take their kids on college tours. They know what SATs are. They know how to get their kids prepared for SAT. They know what what activities they need to send their kids to college and have good resumes and college, prepare for college. And so my big concern and what I've been a quote unquote evangelist for is really more family and intergenerational ministry, ministry to parents. And there's been all these statistics, Barna Group, Fuller Youth Institute, talking about kids leaving youth group after they leave youth group, when they go to college and they become secularized. But my big mantra and concern is that they're not being secularized after they leave youth group, but they're being secularized in high school because of their parents, because of the lack of family ministry and parenting ministry. And a lot of youth groups, American Immigrant Church, we talk about how youth ministry is to walk alongside parents. And in the old immigrant church that I used to minister in, the church was the center of the immigrant church, and parents just sent their kids. But now with the second and third generation parents, they have so many more options. Church is one of many good options. I'm not saying they hate the church or abandoning the church, but we're competing with sports and music and camps and summer programs. And, where I wrote a book about short-term missions, I'd taken 50 short-term mission trips. We used to take 100 kids every summer to 4 different mission trips for community service. Where now these second and third generation families, they're finding new ways to do community service and different things for their kids to be active. And so these are all good. I'm not saying they're bad, but how do we have parents continue to make church an important place in their lives of their teenagers, and make church a priority and live out Proverbs 22 and Ephesians 6 and Deuteronomy 6. And this is, again, this evolving, emerging thing that I'm seeing in the immigrant and now second generation, third generation church. Again, like, I don't need to do college stories anymore. Again, it was a great discipleship activity, taking 15 juniors before their senior year, a week in Boston, visiting colleges, spending time, praying, seeing colleges, and really discipling them while we're seeing colleges. And now they go to college stores with their parents because the parents are more westernized and, more understanding of the culture. And so how do we disciple and minister and equip parents as part of our youth ministry? Sorry, that's a lot. That's a lot.
Yeah. This is fantastic. I love this. And it sounds like, as you're seeing the immigrant church develop or change, you're having to change with it.
Yeah.
But the same ways you did before, you can't do that. You can't do it the same way.
Yeah. I mean, this morning, actually, I was talking to DJ Shuang, who wrote a book on English speaking Asian American ministries. And, this is kind of the context that I'm really talking about. And, like, for example, in the Korean American church, when I see second and third generation churches, that they all speak English, where language is not an excuse anymore. Even having separate youth group, I don't think you need to do it. And I've been 30 years in an immigrant church doing separate youth group. Parents are worshiping in Korean, we're worshiping in English. I think there's an important place for that. I understand why we've done it. But where language is not an excuse, the research from Barna, Fuller, the biblical data is saying that intergenerational ministry is the way to do ministry. And the research is showing why kids are leaving youth group after they leave youth group, and the important role of parenting in the lives of teenagers. A recent book by Christian Smith and Amy Adamczyk, Handing Down the Faith or Passing Down the Faith, talks about the importance of parenting in raising teenagers of faith. And when I read that book, it's kind of a research book. It's a little nerdy, but it's a really great book. And when I read that book, I say, this is a book about good parenting. And most parents have a hard time parenting. I raised 3 teenage boys. I always say raising teenagers was the hardest thing I've ever done.
Mm,
And I have good boys. I always say I had good kids, and it was the hardest thing I've ever done.
mhm,
So how do we help and equip and walk alongside parents? And I see, especially for the Asian American church, and when language is not a barrier anymore,
mhm,
that youth ministry has to become more intergenerational,
mm,
more family centered. Working with parents and ministering to them has to become a vital component of it. And that's where, again, I've seen the biggest emerging direction. It's still new and fresh. I'm in the East Coast, so when I see West Coast churches, I do know that they're more quote unquote advanced and developed, have more pure English speaking churches. And talking to my friends who serve in these churches, I know it's hard because
mhm,
a lot of the first generation, like a lot of my generation, who are second generation, who grew up in the immigrant church, were so used to having youth group separate
mhm,
and apart. And so I'm not even used to sitting in worship with my own children. And when my children sit with me in worship, after the worship, when they were teenagers, it felt like they would come out of worship like I like choked them to death, and they're like deep breathing, like, oh, Dad, that was horrible. It was hard. It was so difficult. I'm like, it's just worship, but they're not used to sitting in worship with their parents either.
mm, mm,
Yeah.
mm. I appreciate the word about intergenerational ministry, especially timely. It's Father's Day coming up, and just kind of encouraging our fathers to really lead their families well.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
um,
And
you
it's
know,
not easy. It's not easy, but I think for youth workers and the church, Asian American church, I hope it'll become a priority.
mm,
I am, in Joshua, the Judges 2:10, it says the next generation will forget about the Lord. And I'm afraid that, my generation was so involved in the church and the immigrant church, but I'm worried about this as I become a parent and a lot of my peers have become parents. Are they raising their kids in faith? Because we have so many other options, again, sports and
yeah,
music,
yeah, yeah, yeah.
camps, and so many things competing with church, and even like Friday night youth group. There's so many things that compete with that time for our kids.
Yeah. As you're talking about parenting, I mean, what are some encouraging things that you say to parents of teenagers, especially if they're immigrants? Like, how do you encourage parents who have
Yeah.
youth?
I First of all, we never shame them.
Mm,
Recently as COVID has gotten a little bit better, I go to the Korean market and I see a lot of the parents, and they're like running away from me, hiding. It's the pastor. Oh no, he's going to shame us. And I, I make it a point never to shame parents.
mm,
I always tell them parenting is hard. I love your kid. And they're like, are you sure? And I'm like, you know what? When it's not your own kid, and they're in my ministry, it's easy to love them. I know it's hard raising teenagers, just developmentally,
mhm,
who they
mhm,
are, their natural inclination to rebel against parents, developmentally, their rebellion, their independence. It's hard being a parent of
yeah,
teenagers.
yeah, yeah.
So, we really try to be a ministry that is open, authentic, sharing our struggles. One of my children had a mental health struggle as a
Mm,
youth group student. And, now he's graduated from college, but we've gotten his permission over the years to share openly about his struggle. And we share a lot about it in our Korean American immigrant church. And that's opened up the doors to a lot of parents.
wow,
Like, I'd say in 30 years, the last 25 years, we've sent 5 kids to a mental health clinic that's in our town. But in the last 5 years, we've probably sent 25 students to this mental health clinic for inpatient or outpatient services, just because the parents know we're open about it. We talk about it. We don't make it a shameful thing. We have parenting seminars, parenting joint prayer meetings with kids, parenting events. We still do the financial aid seminar, but not in Korean, but in bilingual. But for example, the event that we do for parents, we have about 250 parents. We have a pretty large youth group, and if we do something, let's say on raising your teenagers, a seminar, we'll probably have about 25% of the parents. Today I heard of statistics from Orange Ministry. They produced this parent queue worksheet that you're supposed to hand out in churches, and they survey churches and they say only 10% of parents use it to raise up their kids. So it made me feel better. We get about 25%. But just in parents knowing that we're caring and ministering and have opportunities for parents. And I tell a lot of young youth workers, be diligent, be consistent, be authentic and open, continue to have these things for parents, training, communication, events. That this is my wife, who's a psychologist and therapist, calls it, she says, when there are glitches, like, for example, this is an Asian American thing, but we had parents, their 2 oldest kids got into Harvard and their 3rd child was getting C's.
Oh, no.
But that was a glitch. That was something that they were struggling with.
Yeah.
And they knew, hey, we're there for parents.
Yeah.
So they came to us. When a mental health crisis comes up, when a kid's on their computer too much, parents know. Danny and his wife care about parents. They communicate with parents. They have events for parents. And when there is a glitch, they might not come. They'll be the 75% who don't come to any parenting event. But if they have some issue, if they have a struggle, they always know that we're available. We have every Sunday from 2 to 4, since my wife's a therapist and a psychologist, every Sunday from 2 to 4, we say, you can get family counseling on Sunday, 2, 3, and 4 o'clock. You can sign up with a slot with my wife as a family.
Wow.
Most Sundays, we won't get anybody. But when there's a glitch, when there's an issue, parents know we're there and available and open to them. So we're just giving them that opportunity. And again, that openness and just caring for them, hopefully that'll be a channel where God can use to give us opportunity to minister to them. So I just encourage young youth workers and working with parents. It can be a desert. It can be seem unfulfilling and useless sometimes, but I really do believe in this philosophy of what my wife calls glitches. When there's a need that arises, if they know we're open and caring for them, that they'll come to us.
You build that trust with them over the years. I'm encouraged to hear about the family counseling. Your wife is a mental health professional, and it's great that you're providing that service to the families at your church and really serving the church that way. I'm encouraged to hear that. So Danny, you've been in ministry decades. I would love to hear some secrets to longevity. What are some of the things that you've learned over the years? Some lessons that you can pass on?
Yeah. 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 So, you know, as you know, Daniel, I mean, ministry is hard. Any ministry, senior pastor, assistant pastor, ministry is just, I mean, especially during COVID, but even before COVID, I always tell young youth workers, when I was young, there's not a day that didn't go by that I wanted to quit. As I got older, probably every week, got a little older every month. And then about 6 years ago, I did get a new senior pastor. I had a great relationship with my former pastor, and this new senior pastor is a great man, man of God, great pastor. And he came from the mission field, and he was a great pastor. But again, starting a new working relationship with a new senior pastor, as great of a man he was, man, I understood what it was to be like a young youth worker again, trying to develop my relationship with a new senior pastor, trying to gain his trust, him kind of understanding what I'm doing, him questioning some of the things that I do. And ministry is hard. And I think for me, the greatest key for me was what I said earlier, was having a healthy pastoral and professional, I guess I would call it a theology or framework, but really what it was is my identity and worth rooted in Jesus Christ, that I'm loved, cared for, that nothing can take away my relationship with Christ, that Jesus holds me dear. Because again, in ministry, there's criticism, antagonists. I talk a lot about antagonists in ministry, in youth ministry. I personally think youth ministry is the hardest because you have stakeholders that involve church leadership that you have to please, parents who are your critics, and then teenagers. And just as one example I always give, you do a Wednesday or Friday night Bible study, small group, a teen doesn't like it, doesn't enjoy it, goes home and tells his parents. Parents get upset, calls the senior pastor or a church assistant pastor. And then now your senior pastor or assistant pastor or church leadership calls you and says, "What's wrong? What happened?" And then this parent is upset with you. And then this teenager is upset with you, all because of one bad lesson you taught.
Yeah.
And man, as a young pastor, even now, there's a lot of times I trying to go to sleep at night, and your mind's just, rattled, and something's bothering you, and just having that good theology, personal, professional theology, that, hey, my identity is in Christ and my worth is in Christ and I'm loved by him. I think it's been everything to me. It's get ministry is just hard, and you preach a bad sermon again, a parent yells at you, your senior pastor questions what you, and this is again specifically as a youth worker, but just in general in ministry, it's so hard. And just to have that peace and foundation in Christ has been, transformational for me. And then along with that, I think, just a good network of friends. somebody, you know, a lot of people say you got to have friends who don't care about who you are, don't care about
Titles.
your
Yeah.
titles, your degrees, what kind of church you serve in. You know, just, you know, we have this breakfast called Offsite Food Connection, where I meet with a couple pastors, and our number one rule is you can't talk about ministry, and it's just over food, and we just meet and hang out. And of course, we talk about ministry, but it's kind of like an unwritten fake rule that, you know, you're just there to hang out and be yourself and be authentic. And I think that's always been important for me to really have that. And then, you know, over the years, you know, finding ways for professional and personal development. You know, for me, that was studying, going back to school, um, finding some good books to read. Um, you know, I know you did a DMin and PhD, but I think going back to school is a great way to keep yourself fresh and vibrant in ministry. But just finding some ways to develop as a pastor, conferences, um, you know, again, reading some good books and things like that has been important. But I would just go back to that. I don't know how it happens. It's a spiritual process, but that healthy identity in Christ for young pastors. And again, I train raise up a lot of young Bible college and seminary students, 28 now, over 17 years. And again, it's hard to like like teach it, but I just try to model it and emphasize it. And a lot of times, you know, they graduate from seminary after 4 years with me, and they go to their own ministry, and they always come back and they say, Danny, now I understand what you're talking about. Because, you know, when they're interns, I can kind of protect them and shield them from some of the difficulties of ministry. But, you know, I think it's really important to have that healthy identity and foundation, personal, in Christ.
Well, I that was encouraging to me, even as a you know, as a pastor and a professor here, just to be able to connect with people and not have to worry about putting on my degrees or my titles, and then just have friends, and really really making sure that I have community as well. So
Yeah, yeah.
I'm encouraged about the legacy that you're leaving, Danny. You're training all these interns, and you've mentored so many people, and that has been a service to the church, not just to Youngsang, but also just the church at large. And your publications and the way that you are investing in people, I'm grateful for you. Hey, thanks a lot for this time. This, you know, was really good to pick your brain and to hear about some of the lessons you've learned. And so I'm encouraged. God bless your ministry, and thank you for this time that we can have to chat. All right,
Thank you, Daniel.
Danny Kwan of Youngsang Presbyterian Church, everyone. All right, take care.